Hey guys, it's your boy Doomy back again with another video. And in today's video, guys, I wanted to talk about the ego, right? I wanted to talk about, how much pain the ego causes, right? And, I've lived a lot of my life through ego, right? There's still a lot of people that are living through the ego and unlike me, probably don't have the awareness to realize what is happening to them, right? And I'm speaking from personal experience. And I'll start off by saying this. The most freeing thing that has ever happened to me, that has brought me the most calm, that has brought me the most peace, was separating myself from the ego and realizing that the ego is not something that you live through, right? Because it's all about the ego at the end of the day. Like, ego is what separates you from everyone else, when in actuality what you are is the exact same thing as everyone else, whether they are white, Indian, colored, oriental. Like, it doesn't matter. We're all exactly the same thing. But the thing with the ego is that it brings about the separation, that it's all about you, right? When you feel anger, it's because it's all about you. When you feel shame, it's all about you, right? Everything is about you if you are living your life through ego. And one thing that I've realized, specifically looking at my life, was the amount of decisions that I've made throughout my life. And these decisions were made through the ego. Like, I can't explain to you in just words how horrible that is, right? To be constantly in this mind frame of everything is just about me, and how detrimental it is, right? How you're never going to get the outcomes you're looking for if you're constantly living in the ego, right? Because the ego is just, it's gonna lie to you, bruh. The ego is a friend one moment, the ego becomes an enemy the next moment, right? What I say to myself when the ego, or when I realize that the ego is trying to take over, is that, you know, by guarding my mind, which is what I have to do now, that's what I'm constantly doing since I've, changed my perspective and realized that I'm consciousness, that I am awareness, and that I am not ego, I'm not thoughts, I'm not emotion that arise from the thoughts that I think, right? And this is what was one of the biggest steps that I had to take in order to remove myself from this illusion that I was living through, right? But anyways, once I separated myself from the ego and I'm guarding my mind, like I'm saying, and a negative thought comes up, something from the past or something in the future, and I'm like, I know that's you. I know that's you. I am not you, and you are not me. Right? That's what I tell myself. I'm not that thought that just came. That's not my problem. That's you trying to cause drama and trying to cause conflict within and make me feel a certain way. Right? I mean, the ego literally is the fastest way that you can self-sabotage yourself. And there's a lot of people that are self-sabotaging themselves and they don't know why they're self-sabotaging themselves. And I'll tell you why you're doing that. It's because of your ego, right? The ego is what causes you to self-sabotage. But anyways, as these thoughts come around and I tell myself, or I separate myself from those thoughts, I realize that it is such a fight, right? It's a wrestling match within you where you always have to have the upper hand. You cannot for 1 second identify as this ego, because as soon as you do, you're headed to pain, right? And the mind might come and trick you in certain ways and, give you memories that you're going to want to identify with, because there's a feel-good factor to that. But as soon as you identified with it, you're part of the ego now. And the next thing, some thought that is on different spectrum, right, or different emotional sides of the scale is going to pop up, and now you're back to being annoyed. You're back to being either depressed, you're back to feeling shameful, but your ego is constantly, moving you through a roller coaster of emotions, right? It's always trying to get you to feel some type of emotion. I mean, that's the best way I can explain it. And you're always feeling these emotions through thought, which is just thought, but this emotion affects you on so many levels. This emotion is either going to limit you from doing what you're supposed to do, because now you're constantly worried, because now there's this internal dialogue that carries on happening, because now you've allowed yourself to identify with the ego, and now you identify with these thoughts, and now you're not doing what you're supposed to do, right? Because this is quite simple if you think about it. You can't live through the mind, right? Which means you can't live through the ego. You can only live through the moment. You can only live through the now. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you want to look at it, the ego limits your life, right? It limits how you live your life and how much of your life you can actually live. Like, there are a lot of people who are not living, they're actually dead. And I bet you those people are people that are identifying with ego, right? And you've got to be so aware of this. You really have to take the time to do all this extra stuff, such as meditation, where meditation is not about calming the mind. It's more about seeing what the mind is doing, but also having the power, the consciousness and awareness to be able to not react to anything that comes, because that's what it's about. You cannot control the mind. You can't control thoughts. Meditation is not about silencing the mind, where there is no pulse in the mind and there's not a single thought and you are just constantly here. That's not what meditation is about. Meditation is about guiding your attention back from those thoughts back to the present, because the present is where you can live. You can't live through the ego, because the ego is just through the mind, and life is not lived through the mind. Life is lived by doing things, right? Life is lived through what is happening right now, not what is happening in the mind. So that's something I had to learn, right? That's something that changed the game for me immensely. Because now I realize that it's more about action, right? Forget what the mind tells you might happen, because there's always going to be so many scenarios this ego comes up with to try and sabotage you from not doing what you're supposed to do. And if you've ever noticed that whenever you've gone ahead and done something you didn't feel like doing, it was never as bad as the mind made it seem to be. Like, the mind is constantly it's trying to stop you from progressing. It's trying to keep you in a comfort zone. It's trying to keep you from feeling, or not feeling, from experiencing this life, right? That is the job of the ego. Sure, sometimes the ego helps you, right? It helps you move through life, right? But that is very minimal. Most of the time, the ego is just keeping you right where you're supposed to be. Right where you're supposed to be. It doesn't want you to move forward. It wants you to stay right here. It wants you to think a certain way of yourself, which is not true, right? Because you're not the same person you were yesterday. You're not even the same person you were an hour ago, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. You're constantly changing, right? And this is just the way it is. We're constantly changing. The one thing that's constant in life is change. And once you come to this realization that you're not your thoughts, that you're not the emotions that come up after the thoughts, then life becomes so much easier, because now you identify with this higher consciousness, this higher awareness that keeps you right here in the present. And in the present, where you are in control of how you react to thoughts, because now you're not going to react to those thoughts, because you know that's the ego. It's up to its old tricks, trying to keep you from progressing, right? The ego, the enemy of progress. That is what the ego is, and that's what I've had to learn, right? If you're still making decisions through the ego, I can guarantee you're not making the right decisions. I can guarantee you're not making the right decision. That's why they say things such as, if you're angry, someone's done something to upset you, before you make a decision or say something, cool yourself down, calm yourself down before you address that person. They say that for a reason, because your mind is going to be moving or there's going to be a chemistry that's going to be making you think in a certain way in that moment. And if you're a person who can't control your emotions, that means you cannot control your ego. You are weak if you cannot do that. If it's your mind that's causing you to react, you are weak. Masculinity is in control, right? Control is masculinity. Specifically as a man. We're not built the same as women, right? We come from a place where men think through logic and females think through emotion. That's just the way it is. There's just no way around that. And this is facts. We're not, as men, we're not emotional beings. We are logical beings, right? It has to make sense. But if you are someone that is allowing yourself to be stuck in ego, then you're emotional, right? You're making your decisions through emotions, and that is always going to come back to bite you. I know I've had to learn these lessons that I've learned. You say things that you're not supposed to be saying. You do things you're not supposed to be doing, all because you're reacting from the ego. You're reacting from thoughts instead of just being in the present moment, allowing yourself to feel whatever emotion arises at that time. Because listen, I'm not saying you're never going to get angry. I'm not saying you're not going to experience certain emotions. I'm saying experience those emotions, but do not identify with them. Let them come, let them pass, and then you move on with your life. So that is today's video, man. And you will have so much more peace once you can get to this understanding, right? The understanding that you are not this mind, that you are not these emotions, that you are not this body, that you are awareness, that you are consciousness, and therefore you cannot be what you are aware of or conscious of. That's what's helped me. Yeah, it might be a bit confusing, man, if you're new to the game, but trust me, if you're already doing well in life, but you're still identifying with the ego, bro, imagine how much better you could do once you remove the ego completely, right? But of course, if you are doing well, you must have a certain amount of control that most people don't have. Like you part of like 10% of the world, literally, because 90% of the world works out of ego. I mean, look what's happening in the world, all the wars that are going on. That's all ego. That is all ego. So that's today's video. And like I say now, this is my new thing. Always go within for the answers. The answers are not outside of you. The answers are always going to be inside of you. Peace.